In a small, quiet town nestled between thick woods and rolling hills, there stood an old, abandoned house that everyone knew to be cursed. The house had been empty for as long as anyone could remember, but strange things always seemed to happen around it. The local children dared each other to venture near it at night, but none ever stayed long. No one ever spoke about what happened to the last people who lived there, but whispers ran through the town like an eerie breeze. One evening, a young man named Thomas, new to the town, decided he would uncover the truth for himself. He had always been skeptical of ghost stories, seeing them as nothing more than local superstition. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and his curiosity, he set out toward the haunted house as the sun dipped below the horizon. As he crossed the overgrown yard, the house loomed ahead, its windows dark and empty, its wooden walls creaking with the wind. The air felt heavy, charged with a strange tension. Despite his bravado, Thomas felt a chill that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He stepped inside. The wooden floor groaned beneath his feet, and the air was thick with dust. The dim light from his flashlight danced on the walls, revealing old portraits whose faces seemed to watch him as he moved through the rooms. It was silent, too silent, except for the soft ticking of an old clock somewhere deep within the house. Then, just as he was about to turn back, he heard it, a soft whisper. "Get out!" Startled, Thomas spun around, but the room was empty. His heart raced. He took another step forward, trying to convince himself it was just the wind. But then it came again, clearer this time, as if it were right behind him. "Get out! Now!" He whipped around, his flashlight beam shaking as he scanned the room. There was no one there. The house, however, seemed to be alive, the very walls pressing in on him. The air grew colder and the whispers became louder, more insistent, as if hundreds of voices were calling out in unison. In a panic, Thomas turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping him inside. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the hallway, just beyond the beam of his flashlight. It was a man, tall and thin, his face obscured by shadows. His clothes were old-fashioned, like something out of a forgotten time. But it was his eyes that sent a shiver of terror down Thomas's spine, pale, empty eyes, devoid of any human warmth. The figure took a step forward, then another, its movements unnaturally slow, deliberate. Thomas backed away, fumbling for the door, his breath quickening. Who are you?" he managed to ask. The man didn't speak, but the whispering voices grew louder, filling the room, reverberating in Thomas's skull. He was surrounded by them, the sound deafening. The figure drew closer. "Leave! Before he comes back," the voice said, low and guttural, as though coming from the very walls of the house. Desperately, Thomas pushed against the door, his hands shaking as he turned the handle. With a creak, it opened just enough for him to slip through, and he bolted out into the night. Breathless, he ran all the way back to town, not daring to look behind him. When he finally made it home, he collapsed into bed, his mind racing. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it had all been a trick of the light, or his mind playing games on him. But as he lay there in the dark, he heard it again, faintly, like a whisper in the wind. "You're not alone." The next morning, Thomas woke to find an old portrait on his doorstep, wrapped in tattered cloth. It was a picture of the same man he'd seen in the house, standing in front of the very same door. The inscription below the image read, "It was then that Thomas understood." The man in the house wasn't a ghost, he was a warning, a reminder that some spirits don't leave, not because they're trapped, but because they've never been allowed to go. And sometimes, if you listen too closely, they might just follow you home.